You are watching a Fact TV presentation of the Town of Swanzey Selectmen meeting.
All right, it being 5:33, I'll call the meeting to order. Consideration of meeting minutes.
All right. Make a motion, we approve the meeting minutes of March 22nd.
Second, anything further on those? You, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Make a motion, we approve the non-public meeting minutes, March 22nd.
Second, anything on those? No. All in favor?
Aye. Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that. Anything further, Mike?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll put item number 4, public input, on after our first appointment, which is William R. Lambert, professional engineer, traffic engineer, administrator for New Hampshire DOT Bureau of Traffic. Reference the speed limit on state-maintained portion of Holbrook Avenue. Welcome, Mr. Lambert.
If you want to come up here or
Grab one.
grab one, we got a few extras, so we're happy to get rid of some.
Will you be sitting up by your
I can be right on the laptop, right? Giving a French person a mic is like taking his tongue away from him, but we'll see how that goes today. So is this good? This is good?
Doesn't sound like it's on.
No, but you're getting them on the.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for having me tonight. This is a beautiful space. It's always good to get out in parts of the state and find some of these hidden gems. I understand that it's recently renovated and spectacular. So okay. Okay. So welcome again. I was asked to come here. I know that the town of Swanzey had sent me a request to lower the speed limit on the state portion of Holbrook Ave several months ago. I responded to that after we had taken a look at it with an engineering and traffic investigation, and we rejected the request. And the town asked me to reconsider that, and I said that there wasn't any new information, but I offered to come here and explain the process for evaluating speed limits, what we take into effect, and what the laws are. So I came here tonight to do just that, and then to kind of explain the engineering and traffic investigation that we did for Holbrook Ave. Appreciate the introduction. Things have changed a little bit since I sent out some of the letters to the department, to the town. As of Friday last week, I became the highway safety administrator for the Department of Transportation, which means I'm responsible for all of the highway safety programs. I'm no longer the state traffic engineer, although 23 years experience, I certainly take that with me. The contact information that I have, handouts of the slide presentation on the table up front for the select board and for anybody else. And the contact information here is not what has previously been shared. The phone number is different. The email is the same. So just as a little background, and you can't see the bottom of the screen, but as a little background, I have been engaged with speed management and speed limit type subjects for a long time. I've been the state traffic engineer. I was the state traffic engineer from 2000 to 2023 till last Thursday. As the state traffic engineer as of 2013, the commissioner's delegated authority for setting state speed zones was delegated to my position, state traffic engineer. Because of the experience that I had, I was asked to be a panelist at the Institute of Transportation Engineers annual meeting in 2019 to talk about credible speed limits as part of a speed management strategy workshop that followed the ITE Speed Management Technical Advisory Committee that I was on, where we were looking at various speed management strategies around the country, and I think there was one or two that were outside of the country, and issued a publication of best practices. I'm currently the chair of a national cooperative highway research project that's looking at integrated strategies for managing high travel speeds. And one thing that you can't see on the screen that we started, well, pre-COVID, we set up a task force with the state police department, their Office of Highway Safety, the Chiefs of Police Association, DOT, to look at the topic of speed management in general. We always talk about speed management being the 4 E's, so enforcement, engineering, education, and then the last one that hopefully isn't necessary is the emergency medical services. Oh, and one other thing, because I've been dealing with speed management and speed limit issues for so long, I've been carrying around a copy of The Tortoise and the Hare. It's been with me for about 2 years now. As toddlers, we all learn that slow and steady wins the race, but the biggest complaint I get anywhere in the state is people are going too fast. Somehow, somewhere along the way, we forgot that slow and steady is the more effective way to travel, and we need to get back to that for everybody. So a little bit of an overview, speed limit statutes. I want to talk a little bit about the state speed limit statutes and how I'm constrained by those as far as setting state speed zones, why it's important to set credible speed limits, a little bit of the 85th percentile. I'll talk about that and why we tend to set speed limits at that measured value, how we collect speed data, how we did it in the past and how we do it now that we have all this satellite probe data, and then talk about the specifics of this speed study. And I'm going to put that book underneath the projector so you can see the bottom. Oh, you can't see the top.
It does have a little thing you can adjust. It twists.
Perfect. So let's talk about the speed limit statutes. There's a handful of statutes that are applicable. The basic rule and the maximum limits is under 265-60. So it sets the reasonable prudent standard that says that no person shall drive a vehicle on a way at a speed greater than is reasonable and prudent under the conditions and having regard to the actual and potential hazards then existing. So it really puts it on the driver to drive at appropriate speed for conditions. And it goes on to say that in every event, speed shall be so controlled as may be necessary to avoid colliding with any person, vehicle, or other conveyance on or entering the highway. So the driver is always the one responsible for controlling speed, no matter what the conditions are. The more important part for this discussion about RSA 265-60 is this is what the general court has determined are the statutory speed limits for certain character contexts of roads. So within that statute, it defines a school limit, the school zone speed limit. So during 45 minutes before school and 45 minutes after school. But the two that are underlined and highlighted here are that you have 30 miles an hour for business and urban residence district, and those are defined in statute. But essentially, business district would be a downtown Keene or some of the smaller villages. Where you have a business district with on-street parking and storefronts are right behind the sidewalks and a lot of pedestrian activity. And an urban residence district would be kind of a city street network neighborhood. It's not a suburban residential density. It's a fairly strict density. So the statutory 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is a very high standard. And then the 35-mile-an-hour speed statutory limit is for rural residence district and for class 5 highways, also known as town roads, so that's a town's jurisdiction, outside of compact parts of cities and towns. So even within the towns, the class 5 roads, if they fit the first category, business urban residence district, it's a statutory 30 miles an hour. But outside of those areas, class 5 roads are 35. And Holbrook Ave is what we call a tier 4 road, so it's an unnumbered state route. For those that don't know that it's a state route, it looks very much like a rural class 5 road. Then the statute also has the interstate speed limits, and then by statute, if it doesn't meet those first 3 definitions, which are fairly high density, all other areas or other locations are 55 miles an hour. So within the statutes, the Commissioner of Transportation for state highways and the local authorities for class 5 roads have the authority to change speed limits. And that's authority for the state roads is assigned to the Commissioner of Transportation. And as of August 2013, that was delegated to the state traffic engineer. Prior to that, it was delegated to the district engineers. So this part of the state, it would have been the District 4 office in Swanzey that would have been doing it. So there's a history, decades of history of speed limits that were set by highway maintenance engineers who are primarily interested in winter maintenance and roadside maintenance and asphalt maintenance. They're not traffic engineers. So there's a legacy system that I inherited in 2013 that was not necessarily consistent with state law. So in 26562, that it says that the speed limit can be greater or less than the statutory if it's determined that the reasonable and safe speed is different than the statutory speed limit. And then I highlighted on the basis of an engineering and traffic investigation. So it's not an arbitrary change that the Commissioner of Transportation is able to do, or even local authorities. The same applies to RSA 26563 for local authorities, that it needs to be based on the basis of an engineering and traffic investigation. And while that subject's not defined in state statutes, it's defined in professional practice documentation, all kinds of different versions, but they're all pretty consistent. And then it says the Commission of Transportation may determine and declare a reasonable and safe prima facie speed limit that differs from the statutory value. So why is it important to set credible speed limits? It's because individual drivers control their speed according to perceived and actual road conditions. And most, and the research would say 85% or so, are reasonable and prudent for actual conditions. And posted speed limits indicate the maximum legal speed for a specific roadway segment and should ideally be self-enforcing. I just left my previous job on Thursday, and my staff gave me a sign that I came up with that put a less than or equal to math sign in front of the speed limit value, because people treat the speed limit sometimes as a minimum value. They'll complain if the person in front of them is not even driving the speed limit, when in reality, the speed limit is a maximum value. And unreasonably low speed limits are not respected by drivers, law enforcement, or the courts. And when I say law enforcement, frequently deal with law enforcement personnel, and I've gotten speed studies from law enforcement personnel, and the default reports that come from the output for those speed studies from those machines has a input variable for tolerance, and it defaults to 10 miles an hour. So there's a perception, and probably reality, that 10 miles an hour over the speed limit is okay. The law doesn't say that, but that's the way it's enforced, and part of that has to do with the way the courts, probably dating back to the way that speed was measured, but that the courts would convict. And then other elements are considered or the other elements that are based on the posted speed limit, like curve warning signs and passing zones, are determined based on the posted speed. So if I have in the last probably 10 years or so, we replaced all of our curve warning signs. And the engineering method for determining where you want to put curve warning signs is you measure the advisory speed. So you have a vehicle with an instrument that measures the slope of a vehicle as it goes around a curve, and certain percent would become the advisory speed. And when that advisory speed is less than the posted speed limit, then you would put curve warning signs. But if you arbitrarily lower the speed limit to several miles, sometimes 10 or 15, 20 miles below what the prevailing speed is, you're not putting curve signs out that reflect that prevailing speed. So it's important that the speed limit be credible and is self-enforced or complied with by the people that are driving the road. So again, the elements of an engineering and traffic investigation are not in statute, but they're pretty consistent in practice, where it always includes a speed study. We look at the highway geometry, including the roadside offset to hazards, character of the abutting property, and things like that. Traffic volumes, the presence of parking, prevalence of bicycles, pedestrians, crash history, and we use an expert system. A lot of the safety advisors or safety advocates will advocate for an expert system. So that's something that's been developed specifically for evaluating speed limits. And we use in New Hampshire DOT a program called US Limits 2, which it's a public domain program developed by the Federal Highway Administration. input all these variables and others, and then it'll come back with a recommended speed limit based on data from similar roads all across the country. So I mentioned the 85th percentile and why that's important. So this slide just says that it's based on research from the 1960s by Federal Highway Administration by David Solomon, who developed the Solomon curve, and it compares the relationship between speed and collision rates of automobiles. So that's the curve. I think this thing has a pointer. So this bell curve, that would be the distribution of speed on a particular road. So most cars are somewhere in the average, or the largest number of cars are around the average. And the further away you get from the average, the number of vehicles in the study goes lower. And when the research showed that if you look at the crash rates based on the offset from the average speed, the very, very low traffic was subject to high crash rate because the speed differential, as they get closer to the average, it was going down, but the lowest point on the curve is actually to the higher end. It says 90th percentile, but 80th percentile is what the study showed. So when we try to set the speed limit around the 85th percentile, historically, it's because of this research that was done and because of that data. And because of that data, the Federal Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which controls all traffic control devices that we use on public roads open to public travel, says that when a speed limit within a speed zone is posted, it should be within 5 miles an hour of the 85th percentile speed of free-flowing traffic. And I just point out that while Federal Highway uses the term should, and in English language, we all know what should means. In the context of federal regulations, should means it's the same as a shall, unless I can provide an engineering study that supports doing something different. So it's stronger than it would be in the English language. So collecting speed data. So the old way of collecting speed data, it was very cumbersome. It was handheld radar detection was one of the options we had. Frequently now we will put out pneumatic tubes, so rubber tubes that you'll see pulled across the road. We sometimes will use roadside radar devices, but it means taking personnel as part of their work plan to go to a site where we're doing a speed study, and they put it at one location. Now we have all of these devices to are available to us, but we also have, because we all have one of these in our pocket when we're driving, we also have vehicle probe data. So the vehicle probe data, we use TomTom, but there are other sources. We find, while it doesn't capture all the vehicles on the road, it captures speeds all along the road instead of one point. And from what we're looking at, it's probably around 10 or 15% of the vehicles on the road. So some of the positives or the consequences of before is, in the older versions, we would get all the vehicles that went by us at a single point, but we would only get vehicles during the time that we were taking measurements. So it's limited to a single point, and it's limited to the actual data while it was being collected for a fixed time limit. Usually with the tubes, we'll have them down for less than a week. Now with the probe data, it doesn't include all the vehicles, so we get maybe 10 or 15% depending on what part of the state and what the penetration of the cell phone probe data is, but it includes data all along an entire segment, and it includes archive data that can be evaluated in numerous ways at any time. So it goes years back and it goes up to yesterday. So it's a pretty powerful tool for us. So any questions on any of that before I get into the specifics of the speed study for Holbrook Ave?
Yeah, I have a question. Communicating crash data was part of the Army report, is part of this determination. My understanding is that there have been 2 accidents there in the last 60 days. How is that not screaming? How is that not screaming that there's a problem?
That wouldn't have been part of this study because we did the study before the last 60 days. But we,
now you know different.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
What if an insurance company, Fortune 500 companies looked at it as well, and it's debunked the entire study?
What were you saying?
So major insurance companies, underwriters, and council looked at this corner themselves, and they debunked the entire study.
I haven't seen anything.
I don't think he was, I think he was asking for general questions about the process. I don't even think he's covered the specific.
Right, I
Yeah.
haven't started the speed study yet.
Okay, well, what I'm saying then is, doesn't that screen that we have to recalculate the data?
If there are crashes that are higher than the average for that type of a segment, and I'll show you what the US limits output looks like, and I didn't copy the bottom part of it with the decision process, but it will generally come out with, if the crash rate for that segment's higher than average, then it may adjust the recommended speed limit because of that. It is considered.
Okay, and I have another question.
Okay.
You indicated that, I don't exactly have this straight, but basically, that the speed limit has to be consistent. My understanding is that outside this 35-mile-an-hour stretch, which isn't all that long, I don't understand. I haven't done it for a measure, so you got 30 and 30 both sides.
Yeah, I'll talk about that when I talk about this study. I do discuss that.
Okay, I'm not a traffic engineer, but this is screaming to me. Right on.
Okay. So a little bit of background, just I mentioned it earlier, but just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So in May of 2022, the town submitted a request for a traffic study and speed limit reduction on the state portion of Holbrook Ave from 35 to 30 miles an hour. Next month in June, Representative Rhodes followed up on the town request asking for a time frame for completion. My initial response to the May request, I think I said because of resource constraints, it might be several weeks or months, but there was a follow-up to see what the time frame was. So we ended up doing it, and that probe data that I talked about, we didn't have that until like August last year. So when these first two bullets wouldn't have known that the probe data was even possible. But in October, now we've completed the speed studies in a former method, but we also have the probe data. And I provided the results of our engineering and traffic investigation and rejected the request to reduce the speed limit. And in December, we got a follow-up request to ask me to reconsider that, and that's why we're here now. So to answer your question about the speed limit, and it's hard to see in a map, but the blue line, that is a state jurisdiction. That is Westport Village Road from Route 10 on the left, going up to Westport Village and then continuing on as Holbrook Ave to the intersection with Swanzey Lake Road, and then the state jurisdiction then turns on Swanzey Lake Road all the way to Route 32 or 12, I think 12. That's my jurisdiction. That's what the state has jurisdiction over. I circle the section up above that. That's the town portion of the Class 5 portion of Holbrook Ave. That's also 30 miles an hour, in the Westport Village, the more dense rural residential portion of Westport Village is 30. So the Holbrook Ave section from the road that takes off towards the covered bridge to the Swanzey Lake Road intersection, most of that is 35, and then it continues at 35. And again, that's 35 based on the statutory speed limit for a rural residential road.
One way coming from Westport Village to Swanzey Lake Road, the sharp curve, and the speed limit is 25 miles an hour by the state. And yet, there's a little section there that's 35 miles an hour until you come close to the building. Is that not correct?
The 25 miles an hour for the sharp curve would be a black and yellow sign, and that's considered advisory speed. It's based on science.
It's very difficult to determine what the speed limit is to that area because the signs are changing so fast. It's 30 to 35 to 25 one way, as far as I can determine.
Right, and the 25 would be black and yellow for a curve, so it's not a regulatory speed limit.
Okay.
Sure. Anything else?
Isn't that satisfactory from our standpoint? 25?
And again, I talked about how important it is that the speed limits are critical for the actual speed, because that's how we determine where the curve warning signs are going and what the advisory speed is on them. So if I made this 25 and then the advisory speed for that curve is 25, there'd be no black and yellow signs. And from my perspective, it's a lot safer to tell somebody where to slow down and why, than to put a black and white sign at the beginning of a segment and expect people to slow down just because of that sign. There'd have to be a lot of enforcement to get people to change their behavior. The black and yellow curve warning signs, to me, are a lot more proactive safety because it tells people exactly where they should slow down and exactly why. So we collected speed data in 2 locations just so that we would compare the two. West of Pond Road, where towards the more densely settled part of Westport Village, and then east of Ashwellet Rail Trail, where it crosses the section in the where the speed limit is 35. I also ran the US limits to determine the recommended speed limit, and the subsequent speed report, I compared that with the TomTom data just to get an order of magnitude comparison. So west of Pond Road in the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, you can see the 85th percentile speed was 37 in one direction, 36 in the other, for a combined average of 37. What's interesting here is that the next line down from that highlighted value, the 10-mile-an-hour pace, that pace is the 10-mile-an-hour band that includes the largest number of vehicles in the sample. And you can see that the 25 to 35 is below the measured 85th percentile. That doesn't happen a lot. And often you want to have the speed limit within that pace and somewhere kind of in the middle of that pace. And the posted speed limit is 30. In the US limits 2 report, I know you can't read it, but you can see all the, if you had the handout, you can see all the input variables on the basic information, roadway information on the left, crash data information. We didn't necessarily get the crash data in this. In some places, it's very hard to get locations. And then the traffic information, 85th percentile speed, traffic volume, on-street parking and usage is not very high. Pedestrian bicycle activity is high. And you can't see it maybe below the screen, but the program recommended speed limit is 30 miles an hour on that section of Holbrook Ave. Then east of the Ashwellet Rail Trail, so in the subject section where the speed limit is posted 35, the 85th percentile is only a mile an hour more, but you can see that the pace is 30 to 40 miles an hour as opposed to 25 to 35, and that the posted 35 is right in the middle of that. Traffic volumes and some of the other information are pretty much the same. And then the US limit speed zoning report, same input variables, pedestrian and bicycle activities is still high, and because of the traffic data, the recommended speed limit is 35. You really can't see this, but this is what the output from the TomTom data looks like. You can see that it says Westport Village Road and Swanzey Lake Road. So I did the report for the whole road. I zoomed in on the subject section. You can see where the intersection of Swanzey Lake Road and Holbrook Road are on the top. And I highlighted the section on to the left that the data is for, and the 85th percentile, I think, is 41. The closer you get to the intersection where people are navigating the right turns, the 85th percentile drops down to the mid-30s, but pretty much for the whole section, it's pretty consistent. So in summary, I want to make it clear that the New Hampshire RSA's define speed limits based on context and character of abutting land. So I have to start with the posted speed limit, the statutory posted speed limit. So the ones that I talked about from RSA 265-60, the business and urban residence district and the rural residence district would be the ones that apply the most here. And then to vary from that, I have to be able to support that with an engineering and traffic investigation. And it's also important to note that traffic speed is generally not affected by the speed limit changes. Whenever we've done before and after studies, we might change the speed limit up or down by 10 miles an hour, but the speed of traffic does not change. It might change by a mile or maybe 2 sometimes, but it generally does not change by the number on the sign. And that speed limits should be self-enforcing, meaning that they reflect a reasonable maximum speed for the segment. And I drove the segment. I came down here before I sent out that report in October, or before I scheduled this meeting in December. I came down, I slipped on the ice in the rail trail. I remember it, so it was definitely in the winter time. And I drove the segment, then I drove it in October with our district engineer. And I'm confident that the 35 is appropriate for the type of road that's out there, outside of the Westport Village segment. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from the board, or if it's from anybody else.
I have one question. Is there any way, or do we have to have the black and white 35 speed limit sign, or could we take that out and maybe put in a black and yellow 30-mile-an-hour advisory for the rail trail, that it's coming?
Rail trail is a little bit of a different story. Now in my new position as the highway safety engineer, one of the things that we're looking for is how to address all of the rail trails in the state. Railroad crossings by design tend to be away from populated areas, so they tend to be kind of remote. But now that they're rail trails, we've got people that are crossing in those remote locations, and we've got some that are in some pretty sketchy locations. So we're looking at a hierarchy of how to sign for those. I think this would be appropriate given traffic volumes and speeds with just some signs, and that's something that we would typically do. So it'd be a trail crossing or pedestrian crossing signs or something of that nature. And we could probably, one of the things we haven't determined is whether we would put an advisory speed plaque associated with that warning message to let people know they should slow down for possible pedestrians.
Does the 35 need to be posted in that particular spot, or could it still be 35, but just not posted, eliminating the 30, 35, 30 problem?
The black and white sign marks the change from the 30 in Westport Village to the 35 beyond that on the state portion. So it really needs to be somewhere. The further away we push it, the less effective it's going to be. So it really needs to be where you leave the village. Might even be a little further from the village now than it needs to be, but I'm not proposing to move it any closer.
Thank you.
Is there a standard amount that supposed to achieve when you're in advisory speeding? Is there a standard amount of rating that happens for advisory speeding?
If I know what you're asking, is that when we do curve warning signs, if the measured advisory speed is 5 miles an hour less than the posted speed limit, we will put a curve sign in advance of that curve, an advisory speed plaque that tells you what the advisory speed is. If the advisory speed is 10 miles an hour or more less than the posted speed limit, we will also put chevrons through the curve. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to have an advisory speed that's more than the posted speed limit, because it's not legal to go more than the posted speed limit.
Not more than, obviously, but the same as the refresh the driver's memory. Yeah, like you said, we obviously want to take away the advisor's speed limit. But could it be the same as the posted speed limit?
When we redid all of our curve warning signs, there's some flexibility in how the standards can be applied, and we picked certain criteria to be consistent, because we wanted, when we look at traffic control devices, we don't look at one particular location, we look at a system. So we want it to be consistent with the whole state. So we picked just that if it was going to be, it had 5 miles less than the posted speed would be the advisory speed. That's where we would put that, and then we would add the chevrons at 10 miles an hour. There's in the table is recommended and required, and we went with the recommended, which is the advisory speed. Yes, sir.
You're going to get your copy of the results, but in light of the fact we've had 3 accidents, over the last 3 months, doesn't that require that those 3 accidents be plugged into the numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to rerun it. I'd be happy to rerun it with the numbers, but like I said, changing the speed limit, unless it's really sustained targeted enforcement, doesn't necessarily change behavior. So I don't know what the crashes were. Like the crash that happened and started, we don't know if that was excess speed. We don't know if it's going to change the values of the report unless we know what kind of crash it is. We don't put all the crashes in, because sometimes they may not be speed related. They may be impaired driver things like that that aren't going to be affected by the speed limit.
I understand as a layman, I'm looking at the fact that the town has indicated there might be a problem. He said there's no problem, and we said, hey, free graduates. That tells me there's a problem. Okay.
But the problem might not be the speed limit. The problem might be cross slope of the road, curvature of the road.
You're right, but that should impact the speed, it seems to me. Not correct.
You're saying Holbrook has a class 4?
I think it's class 2,
Class 2.
which is a state road.
Speed limit difference between that and 5? Is there one?
Class 2 puts it under state jurisdiction, but it's defined as rural residential. So it's in the same 35-mile-an-hour statutory limit as a class 5 road outside of compact parts of cities and towns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your re-election.
Wasn't me.
Mr. Hutlover, I'll talk to you. So, a couple points, and I think there's some questions in here and a little more of a conversation. So, and this whole conversation began with, and we came about the selectmen and discussed the fact about lowering that speed limit. The concern at that time, and that, I recognize the entire trail of our conversation was well up there. And one of my superpowers is this stenographer memory. And I remember vividly talking to selectmen, and their concern was that if we requested a change in the speed limit, that the state may raise the speed limit. And that was the concern for not wanting to do anything at all. And that's whenever the conversation started with you. And I said, look, how do we have a guarantee that that is not going to happen? Is that even a possibility? And the conversation that you and I had was that you, recognizing that the state would not ever go into a town and tell them they had to raise the speed limit because you live in New Hampshire and you know what that would be like. And the quiet part that we never really said out loud, and I remember specifically, was you said that if the speed limit is reduced after a traffic study, if the will of the people will still reduce it, the reason that you suggest to not reduce it is because if somebody got a ticket, that they could fight it and they could win because the study said, 35 or 40. So I took that as, if after we did all of this and if it was the will of the stewards of the town and the people still wanted that was possible. So with all of that being said, I think my question is, if the selectmen, I have not spoken to them, it's the first time I've seen them, if they said, look, we've gotten more attention and we have had the 3 accidents and we know people are speeding, which is why we requested it to be reduced in the first place, what would be the reason to not reduce it?
I think I got your point, and I don't know if I can step away from the mic, but the most important part to me is that in statute, it doesn't say that the prime fashion speed limit is greater or less than reasonable safe based on the will of the people. It specifically said the legislative intent is that it's on the basis of an engineering and traffic investigation. So while I would never, as I told you, I would never come to a town on the basis of an engineering and traffic investigation and say, I'm going to raise it 10 miles an hour. As long as that door, I wouldn't get there if I did. I might come back and recommend it if that's what I thought needed to happen. I came Route 9 here. Some of you may remember. It was the Senate President's brother, Tom, his brother Dan, was the state rep in this area, had amended a bill on speed limits and raised the speed limit from 35 to 45. That's not my choice at that point, because the legislature says it's going to be 45 as part of the bill. So my sign crews went out there and changed the signs, what they should have done, from 35 to 45 to meet what the bill said. And then the folks in Sullivan said, well, nobody asked us. I wouldn't do that without asking the folks in Sullivan. I raised speed limits in 2 villages similar to Sullivan, once we had the TomTom data, Hill and Tamworth. Sent both of them a letter in advance that said, this is what the study, the research shows, this is what I recommend. If you don't feel otherwise, we'll proceed in that direction, and both of those went up. Speed limit, and a lot of my speed limit presentations, we talk about some of the case studies that we've done. The first speed limit that we increased was actually prompted by the local police chief in Wakefield, where the police chief had a stretch of 153 that kind of paralleled Route 16, and it was posted 35. And the number on the card, based on my predecessors, like I said, I got decades of not necessarily good practice setting speed limits, is that it's a curvy, windy road. When he was pulling people over at 45 to 50, he was really pulling people over what he thought was reasonable and prudent for the road. And if he was pulling over at 60, which is where he thought they were speeding, now it's a 25 miles an hour heavy fine. It's an increased fine, and it must appear. So we worked together, we did the research, and we went to the town and the select board meeting, and we presented the data collaboratively, and we raised the speed limit from 35 to 45. But before we did that, for 12 miles of Route 153, we looked at all the curves, based on that, increased the speed limit, and we added something like 200 assets. So, like I said earlier, there's a lot that goes into speeds. I've been dealing with speed limits a whole lot. It's by far my number one concern. I don't get a lot of concerns about 35-mile-an-hour speed limits. It's usually on Route 10s and Route 12s and 32s where people are going at a much higher rate of speed. But 35 is a statutory value for a rural residential road. And by any definition, I think Holbrook Ave, as Swanzey Lake Road meets that definition. Like I said, I could also say that Holbrook Ave, going to Swanzey Lake Road, would also meet that definition, and it's also the statutory 35 of the Class 5 road. I don't have any jurisdiction of that. So I can't make any change there, but if I were to run another engineering traffic investigation, I would think that it would not support the 30 that's on the town portion of Holbrook Ave. That's a long-winded answer for your question, but.
So, with respect to that, what I refer to as the brown stretch through there that is 30, and observing that that is the town portion. So that is certainly rural, it's all farm, there's nothing in there. I mean, I think you could probably take like a Payroll Manifest there. And that would, unreasonable low speed limits are not respected. But I know for a fact that I go 30 in there because I don't have for a maximum, right? Like that is what that speed limit is. I don't go 30 because I think that I can't go faster. I go 30 because that's what that speed limit is. So I think I'm back to my original question of, I mean, is there like a fine that you're going to get? I just feel like if this were outside your house, like if this was your actual problem outside of your house, would you say your hands are tied? Because I feel like that's what you're saying, but I don't feel like their hands are tied. So if this was your, right outside your house and knowing everything that you know, would it be simply if my hands are tied, that's what it says? Like I go back to, are you able to change it? Like, can it be changed? I don't understand how it can.
I hear what you're saying, and like I said, there's decades of poor practice, and poor practice leads, in my opinion, to some of the disrespect that speed limits have. I'm dealing with one right now where there's a 35 around an interchange, it's nothing but the interchange ramps, and somebody that's got a subdivision 1,000 feet away wants to extend it. Well, it's already, probably should be 35 where it is, so extending it just increases that poor practice that was done. I'm not going to get walk-away handcuffs if I make it 30 miles an hour. It's only a matter of changing signs. But since 2013, when I took over speed limits, I've been very consistent in following the state statutes and following accepted engineering practice for evaluating speed limits. It's not always popular. I always get a lot of feedback that it seems unreasonable that we're letting drivers determine what the speed limit is, but that's essentially what the statutes have said.
Thank you, and I would just close with, I think it's very evident that the selectmen have done everything to try to be reasonable, to do anything they can to accommodate the residents, and they're throwing out multiple suggestions of anything. And I guess I just feel like it's just a roadblock, and that's what I'm having, no pun intended, that's what I'm having trouble understanding is, if it's only gonna help, then why can't we do it? And I'm really not trying to argument it, and I think it probably appears like that. So the guy will sit down with that feels like is why not?
So the short answer to that, again, is going back to the map. Blue line is where I have jurisdiction. And I said earlier that for all intents and purposes, it's Tier 4 road, which is a numbered state road. It looks to anybody else that knows the state system as a local road. For all intents and purposes, it looks like a Class 5 road. So if that is a Class 5 road, I'm sure John Coffell in the Swanzey office space of road wouldn't have an issue with turning it over. If the town wanted to regulate that road, I'm sure that's something the state would consider. But, you know, that's not generally a popular thing. Towns don't want to take over more maintenance, but it turns the regulatory jurisdiction from the state traffic engineer or the commissioner of transportation over to the town. The town has their speed limits. They're tied to the same statutes, similar statutes about engineering and traffic investigation, but they're usually out of view. They're not on the main roads, so they don't get as much attention. But that's one option that we always offer, although it doesn't generally go very far.
Mr. Lambert, if at the end of this, if the selectmen were to have a conversation, if they were to say, look, we hear you, and we're back to where we started, and we would like it to be 30, are you able to do that?
I'm not anymore because I'm not in that position. But I've talked to the commissioner, and certainly the person that has that authority right now is my assistant for the last 6 years. So he's aware of this. I think he would make the same decision I did, but I don't want to speak to him either. Again, I fall to what the statutes say in the engineering and traffic investigation is, and if we added the crash data and came up with a different number, we'd be happy to reconsider it. I don't necessarily think that would happen. Yes, sir.
Did I hear you right? Did you actually say that some of the study was completed in 1962?
Not my study, but the study on the Solomon curve, the 85th percentile. There's been several studies since then that have tried to either dispute it or confirm it. It's all, it comes back to similar results as the study in the 1960s.
Well, maybe you should add that to your talk when you're talking to people, because that's 60 years ago. Things are a lot different. There are more people using Holbrook Avenue than there were 60 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know if that's clear.
Yes, they are.
I don't know if that study from the 60s wasn't Holbrook Ave, that's a national study.
Okay, but even though you're applying it to Holbrook Ave, and Holbrook Ave has a lot of different things on it. Coming out of West Swanzey, there's kind of a little garage there that someone works with a lot of things out in front of the house. And then you get into the agricultural area with gates and people taking horses and animals back and forth. And the rail trail crosses. People, I live near a rail trail and I have to be very careful because people are not that careful when they're coming out on a bicycle or walking. Sometimes they walk right out in front of you. I think they should take a real hard look at that area.
Have you done a study on how many people use that road for cycling, jogging, any of that sort?
We don't have counts for the road or trail.
for the road.
Yeah, we don't have counts on pedestrian places.
Can I rail trail
It's hard
inside?
to count them. I think with the road data, it's gonna be an option, it's not one that we paid for. But we did on the US limits to input, we put high pedestrian and bicycle traffic, so there's not a number applied to that, it's high or not. And so that was figured into the determination.
You know, a lot of people said, well, including myself, I almost looked at multiple times on that corner, especially if you're down on the cemetery, or people just don't pay attention to you. So that really did really good speed, especially with adding more condos and everything in Swanzey, everybody needs to go work road, so they did have a bicycle or ride a horse down that road.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is, people use the term speed and speed limit interchangeably. They're two different things. Because I can lower the speed limit, and I'm telling you that's not going to lower the speed. Because people drive the speed based on the character and the context of the road. So lowering the speed would be a great thing to do, but we need to change something on the road to make people go slower, or do a very heavy targeted and sustained enforcement. But I just want to make it clear that those are two different things. When we say people want to lower the speed limit because they want to lower the speed, those are two different things.
But it can be enforced by law enforcement if the speed is lowered. They can patrol it a little bit more, and they patrol really well on Holbrook now. It's great to see. But that corner, there's not really a good place for them to patrol.
First of all, if I see a speed limit, that's a flying problem, and if the sign goes down, so do I. But I'm struck by the fact that you don't seem prepared to err on the side of caution, and I am flabbergasted because that would be the Department of Transportation. And
I hear what you're saying, and I guess you're trying to insist that changing the sign is going to change behavior, and what I keep saying.
change mine, you can't speak for anybody else.
The statutes are basically rules, right?
Law, yeah.
Law. They can be changed, can't they? Rules
Yeah.
can be changed.
Representative Rose was at the Senate Transportation, House Transportation earlier this year, and I think he'll tell you that it's very hard to get House Transportation to change law to make it more restrictive.
But it can be done. Just gotta meet the right channel.
I mean, one of the things,
Yeah, and again, I'm carrying this around because I agree, people are going too fast. I don't disagree with that. But one of the things I've always felt in the statute, in that basic speed law, we go from 30 and 35, really if you're in a neighborhood. So whether it's rural residential or urban residential, it's a neighborhood. And it goes all the way to 55 for everything else. So if you see 40s, 45s, 50s, those are all state speed zones. I've always thought that there should be an intermediate 45, and some states are going that route for roads that aren't major thoroughfares, kind of rural two-lane highway with narrow shoulders. This puts the pressure on my position to say it should be less than 55, if it's not that 35 rural residential. And you can probably think of a lot of places around here that are pretty narrow road, Route 63 through Chesterfield, not too far away. Where you would want to go 55 there, and probably towns don't even want to do 40 or 35.
So I'm going down that hill, 53, yeah, that's sketchy.
This way.
I'm actually familiar with all this. What we have here is paralysis by analysis. Your study doesn't take into account foot traffic or people walking along the cemetery accessing. It doesn't take into consideration the few crashes and previous crashes in other years. Your cameras were set up in the areas of the curves where people actually slow down. Study has already debunked your entire theory here. We have fire, chief of police, 3 selectmen who were voted by the people in this room to carry out our wishes. They unanimously voted to have this corrected. And yet, we come here and we listen, we see some nonsensical data that's put up on here that makes really no sense. It's dated, it's outdated. And so there we have it. So I ask you, sir, have you ever made a mistake?
or maybe plenty of mistakes. Probably.
Well, you just made another one. And as far as liability goes, you just attach your name to whoever sues the state, it's gonna be the Lambert law. Because I can't see for God's good grace why anyone would have this still at 35 miles an hour, knowing everything we've told you. There's nobody in this room that thinks you made a damn bit of sense out of all of this. We all know that it's dangerous. We're asking the Lord. And what I see here is bureaucratic arrogance. You really don't care what we think. You really didn't come down here to help us. You came here with your laws, your rubber stamp, and you're tossing off to another guy. You're off on your little promotion. And, you know, basically, you're our mere people. Everything's fine, go away, and I'll see you later. That's where we're at.
Well, I think he did open the door to maybe our representatives enacting a law or proposing a law to change it. You said Dan Eaton did it, right? So.
I hear what you're saying. I need to let people know that I apply the same logic to every road in the state. And I've been doing this for 23 years. It's not always popular, but it's consistent. And if I lower the speed limit at every location where somebody thought people were going too fast, the whole state, I mean, I used to be London example. The folks said that because the people in their subdivision were all well over 60, that they need more time to respond to people that are coming into their intersection, so that it should be 35. You use that logic, every road in the state would be 35, and that's just illogical. So I'm following the law, but I'm following the practice, and I'm trying to be consistent on every road that we maintain throughout the state. I did come here to fix things. I responded to the request to lower the speed limit. The select board respectfully asked me to reconsider, and I said, I could have sent another letter, but I said, I want to be in person to take the heat and to offer an explanation as to what goes into setting speed limits in the state of New Hampshire. It's not an easy job. It's not a popular job, but it's one that I take very seriously, and I've been doing for 23 years. And I'm not handing the problem off to my successor. He certainly knows how to get a hold of me, and I'm not too far away from his desk.
Just a way of, because is it state law that every town is 30 miles per hour for every town unless otherwise posted?
That is not state law. State law would say that it's 30 miles an hour in business and urban residence district, and in class 5 roads outside of urban.
So it will be 30 unless otherwise posted.
No,
School zones are 20.
Those are local ordinances, and those are all by the county roads.
And you're basing your efforts to not change this based on previous practice that was poor decision making by your own admission here. This was poor decision making prior to you being in this position.
No, I would say that the poor decision making are roads that were arbitrarily lowered for desired values. If you drive west of Woodstock, all of 112, where most of it is 35 miles an hour, and to look at the regulations because of the curve of the road, I would rather get black and yellow signs telling people where those curves are.
We have those, and they're for people to be aware that there's some sense of the change in the roadway, of caution. How long have you been driving? How many years? Approximately 30, 40 in excess, right?
45.
When there's a speed limit, the people adhere, in your general estimation, you think they adhere to that number? Is that a recommendation, or is it because the car stalled for them for 30 miles an hour? I don't think so. I've been in the business 33 years, and that's not what happens. If the posted speed limit is this number, well, the cops give us 10 over anyway. So if it's posted at 35, we're going to be 45. I think you can get the same opinion from these two gentlemen here, who've been in the business also for a long time. So it just makes most sense to me. With a limited sight distance and changes in the terrain, and a pathway that goes across the snowmobiles, walkers, bicyclists, children in the area, horseback riders, they can't move as fast as a vehicle that's coming in excess of 35 miles an hour. So it just makes no sense to me. That's, my understanding is that the town has to petition the state to reduce this number. I've traveled it many, many times, several times today, just to make sure when I came here. The only rational idea I can come up with is the Lake Road is 35 coming west, and if you make the left onto what is now Homefield or whatever it is now, right? They still have a chance to stay side, by the way, the Elm Black Sign still got the old. If they continue at 35, then they go to the cemetery and reduce it back to 30, going to Westwood. Why not at an intersection, if it's 35 come to the intersection, why wouldn't we be consistent and make that whole stretch 30 miles an hour? Does that make sense to you?
I just told you in the last.
The state says, and this is based on previous past practice, how about maybe turning the page and say, maybe we should think about doing some of these things in a better attempt, maybe to slow people down, hopefully. It just makes no sense to me.
Appreciate that. Like I said, I don't get a lot of understanding, sometimes get it, but then there's a lot of times when I walk away and they're all for the changes proposed, or they recognize why we're not making changes if that's the case. But that every time. That's why I came out here, and again, I could have said another memo, and I just didn't want to do that.
For me, it's very informational about how the students are decided on, so it's been very, definitely appreciate you coming down. Just wanted to confirm something you said. Right now, the average speed of the people that drive on that road, based on the studies and the information we get from phones, is 36 to 38 miles an hour.
Average speed, 37 miles an hour is 85% percentile speed, so that's 85% of the people driving that or less.
Sure. So that right now, that's only 2 miles an hour above the posted speed limit of 35. If the road was, the speed limit on the road was talking 30, and people still drive, like you said, the nature of the road, I'm guessing it wouldn't change a whole lot. So it'd still be around 37. It'd still be under the 10 mile an hour allowance that you mentioned for that usually municipally enforced.
Yeah, I'm not speaking for law enforcement.
No, I understand.
What I said is that when I've got reports, there's an input variable on the report that says tolerance, and the false number on that tolerance is usually fine. They can change it to reflect their actual practices, but the false value is usually fine. And to your point, the speed limit that we looked
This
at,
is wishful
and
thinking.
again, it was
This is
prompted
wishful
by
thinking.
law enforcement and citizens. 35 mile an hour speed limit in Candy on Route 27. When we did the speed data, we looked at the distribution. The posted 35 captured less than 5% of the people on the road. So 95% or more were doing closer to 45 to 50. And again, with the town support, we did raise that. We go back later, and we haven't changed the speed of traffic on that road. Because traffic drives the character of the context of the road. The numbers say that they're doing close to 40, and they leave Westport Village coming up to that curve.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Lambert, before you leave, what are our next steps?
If there is significant crash data, it could be forwarded to, I can get it to the right person to send it to my address, and we can rerun the studies with the crash data and see if it changes the numbers at all. So I would think that would be the next step. Unless the town, and I would think this would be a town meeting item, would be interested in taking over Holbrook Ave to Swanzey Lake Road. It's a Class 5 road.
So our two options are the legislative route and the second, which we just discussed.
Right.
And would you provide us with the contact information to Michael tomorrow? So we have, for your successor?
Okay, can do that.
Thank you.
And keep us in the loop on the, your efforts with the rail trail crossings.
Will do.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Turn off the projector.
Well, let's see what Jennifer Rhodes can do.
Yep.
I don't think our,
Barry will get it.
I don't know if that's on, so.
Of course it is. They're on Facebook Live.
Yeah. What was it that Reagan said? Missiles are launched.
We'll give him a minute.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. The biggest challenge is it's generalized data, generalized concept.
We still have the gray areas of terrain.
Yeah, and
town roads.
And he has the ability, they have the ability to make an adjustment.
So start writing that law. I believe April 6th is the, whatever day. Attach it to the budget or something.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to give folks a chance to leave, and then we'll keep going with our meeting if you're interested.
Well, what's Joe talking about? Does he talk about the meeting that we had last week?
I thought you said, I mean, it was just a general opportunity to have an update since I missed the meeting.
Okay.
In case that discussion.
First to come in without Ken.
What's that?
The first to come in without Ken there. I'm kidding. Thank you.
I think we go ahead.
All right, we'll continue with our meeting, and Police Chief Joe Gonsalves.
Pick a throne. Actually, why don't you sit in that one if you don't mind? Get me closer to the mic. We're still good, right, Josh? Still good? You still recording and everything?
We're going to have our meeting now, so if you could maybe go downstairs and continue your conversations, that'd be
Or
great.
you're welcome to stay.
Thank you. Or you could stay for the police chief's update on the department. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Are these mics hooked up?
He said he didn't hook them up to the PA system, but they're hooked up to the recording.
Oh, okay.
So, going over more current events, police department, we've had several computers exchanged or replaced, so that's been a great upgrade. Greatly appreciate that. We're also now starting to look at new MDTs for the cruisers. I'd like to replace all 4 that we have. 2 are 7 years old, and the other 2 are about, I would say, 4 to 5 years old.
How are the prices on those running now? Has it gone up a lot or no?
Well, the quote I got a few months ago was about $5,000, just over $5,000 to replace an MDT. I just inquired today to get an updated quote, because that was a few months ago. So we can expect at least that amount, if not higher. So I'll probably get a response from Mr. Treadwell maybe tomorrow. So we'll see what that costs us. As you probably recall, we had 2 cruisers that were out of service for a period of time, which was a little bit of a deficit for us. We had one that had an engine issue that was covered by warranty that took a while to repair. And then we had another vehicle that had a collision with a deer. So that took a while to get repaired and put back on the road. But they're both back and running pretty well so far. Now we're looking at purchasing another vehicle, trying to maintain our schedule that we put in place, or Tom put in place previous to my arrival. So we're due to replace 1 vehicle. I contacted 5 dealerships to get quotes and prices, both Fords and the GM Tahoes. So I've got those quotes. I've got a recommendation to purchase one, and hopefully we can do that relatively soon. The inventory is not as bad as it was last year. Last year, we were very lucky to find 2 vehicles. Some departments couldn't find any vehicles, but they do have inventory on hand, some more than others. So if we want to get the one that I think we should get, then we shouldn't wait too long. We have the 3 new...
How is that we have the funding available now to do it?
Capital improvement, I think, puts away from 4
Yeah,
every
the
3
only thing I
years.
was unsure of and I needed to check was we usually pay for the outfitting out of the revolving fund, and last year we really had to clean out the couch cushions. We had decreased the amount of the detail fee. It gets funded from detail fees. The cruiser portion we had reduced back when gas prices were like $1.80, and then of course they went up to $4 or $5 a gallon. So I just need to make sure the monies for outfitting are there currently. But the money for the cruiser is definitely
available. The 3 newest employees are all off probation. They're working out very well. We're very fortunate and lucky to have them. We're still shy of 1 officer, which, considering all the other departments, we're in very good shape. So I'm grateful for that. But we are looking presently to add to our group. I am participating in a virtual job fair that has about a dozen schools involved. I'll do that next week. And if we don't find someone there, possibly we could find an intern, maybe have an intern program. We'll see what develops with that process. It's my first experience with this type of job fair, so it'll be interesting to see what we get. Hopefully we have some interest.
Is Officer Johnson, does he have a vehicle that a regular frontline cruiser he takes over the high school, or is he using something different? Or?
No, he's got one of our, that vehicle's vehicle 7, that was designated as a detail vehicle. So okay. Only officers were using that for details.
Yeah.
So he uses that to go over to the high school.
Right, because he's still available.
He's still available.
The day,
if
right?
He needs to come out, we'll call him out. I've done that before, and especially when the schools closed for bad weather, obviously he's still available, so he'll work the road.
Good.
And by the way, the SRO program has been fabulous. We've gotten great reviews. So we hope to grow on that program.
Do they still have a law enforcement pathway there, do you know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But that'd be something we could probably.
Now that he's back, maybe we can do something. And my other thought was the Police Cadet Academy.
Sure.
I think they go over to Hesser College or something. I think in June or so after graduation, or after school gets out. Okay. And I believe it's a 3-year program. My son participated in 2 out of the 3 years. So, and that's through your New Hampshire Chiefs of Police Association, I think.
Okay.
So it'd be nice if we could get some working toward your goal of getting more people involved. But maybe we could try and get some kids from the high school to participate in that and see if it's something they want to pursue.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I think you were planning to try to this summer partner with the recreation department as well and incorporate for younger younger people as
Even
well.
younger.
So.
Yeah, my old police department does a camp, and they do it for 1 week. I think it's 2 weeks during the summer, and they do it in cooperation with the recreation department, and they've had great success with it. They do also kind of require companies to help with the fees and the expenses with that. So that's something we can explore.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can hopefully get it running this summer. That would be nice. I spoke to Ashley briefly about it. She does have like 1 week down at the lake right after school ends, and one week right before school begins, that we'd be able to use the facilities down there.
How's the job fair? What operationally, is it a Zoom fair? Is it
Zoom? Yeah, it's an electronic platform, so it'll be interesting.
So how does it unravel? How do you?
It's my first time, so we'll be interested to see.
So you're participating with chiefs of other departments?
I don't know how many police departments will be involved. I think it's mostly private corporations, companies. I hope there's not too many other police departments there. Hopefully I've got the monopoly.
And it's just New Hampshire, or is it a tri-state area, or?
I think every corporation or company that wants to be involved can sign up and pay the fee and participate. So you could have Fortune 500 companies involved, so to speak. Anybody who wants to hire can participate. You have to prove that, in order to get you to get in there, you just can't jump into this virtual meeting. You have to be approved and be given a password prior, so.
Maybe somebody down in the big city might want to look at a nice
someone
place like
wants-
Swansea to work.
Absolutely, change your environment.
Jim Wall have any suggestions for you?
Well, he always does.
Oh, so we're going to put on the motor cops?
I wouldn't mind getting a Harley.
Joe might come out of retirement for that.
No, that'd be fine.
He looks more like a BMW now, I think, than a Harley. Something
Maybe a recliner.
I mentioned the detail rates, that's going to be coming back probably next week. The good news is, because based on the legislative changes that happened, I think about 10 years ago now, as employees have aged out, the details no longer apply to the retirement system.
Oh, great.
So we only have one employee that still gets compensated that way. So basically we'll just make up for that employee when they work details through the administrative fee. So we're going to be able to increase the amount we're paying the officers for working while still either decreasing or keeping the rate relatively level and bringing the cruiser rate back up. So it should be a relatively kind of a win-win for
very good.
Absolutely.
maybe. So
Yeah.
that'll help be an incentive to the officers as well when they work those details.
And we got 2 officers who are working these details pretty regularly every week, so that'd be great.
I passed Roxbury over on Route 32 doing the phone lines.
Yes.
Oh, is that who that was? Yeah, I saw it. I didn't recognize the car. I knew it looked different.
But if we had an application, I could have slowed down.
Probably like an elected constable there or something. And so we'll be bringing back the cruiser as well. Again, it's relatively straightforward, just as long as we make sure the funding is all set for the outfitting.
That's basically all I have.
Do you,
Any questions?
would you be able to provide Sly and Michael a synopsis or a summary of our meeting on Monday with Bob Krebs and Cynthia Richard?
Sure. Do you want me to do that by email or?
Oh, just right now.
Right now. So we did have a meeting. Obviously, there was some concern about the speed of vehicles on Holbrook. Seems like primarily larger vehicles traveling at what appears to be a high rate of speed. Mr. Krebs identified several companies. He's looking to possibly have a letter sent to some of these companies identifying the fact that their vehicles were observed to be traveling at a high rate of speed. Cynthia Richards was there also. She would like to see more signage. She asked about putting the possibility of some cones out there on Saturday mornings when she has the pony club. I'm all for that. If she likes to put it out there, that'd be fine. I put out the information to my officers that they should be aware of that activity on Saturday mornings, to be out there and make sure that they can keep the cars going at a slow rate. So not to scare the horses. Obviously, horses can be somewhat sensitive to vehicles, so. And that was pretty much it. Did I miss anything?
Now, I wonder if there's a way that we could have some patrol over there, just to get a sense of what the speed is. Because with 38 may seem fast, but it may be, it's within your realm of tolerance.
Well, that's
I'm just taking 38 from this, but.
Yeah, our sign that we had out there pretty much corroborates what the state's results were. Everything seems to be in sync, so it didn't fluctuate from what he was telling us today. That sign pretty much captured the same amount of speed. I mean, you have variance, so he's looking at the medium. You're gonna get people, kids or whoever in the middle of the night who wanna go 55, 60 or more. So that's an outlier. But for the most part, people are doing the mid to maybe a little higher 30s.
I guess my concern with the letter, and I really didn't think about it when we were there, I was just trying to gather information as you were, is that we're assuming that those vehicles were traveling at a rate of speed from those different vendors that is really not tolerable in that kind of a situation, but we don't know that. So.
Yeah, I think that would be problematic to send out letters to companies that law enforcement who are trained on how to document speed limits aren't the ones that observe these situations, but residents. If you're standing next to the road and a big truck goes by, even if they're going 35, it can often feel like they're going pretty fast. I don't think we actually have any evidence that I'm aware of about those.
Well, we're not sending the letter, right? It's going to be from the private party, so.
No, I don't think.
No, they
asked us. Yeah, I'd be against that also.
Would you be able to look into the flashers? What that cost would be? Maybe they're portable, we could move them to different areas of town, or.
Sure, I mean, there's
something.
different ones. There's quite a few different vendors. They're always reaching out to try to make a sale. They have different options. You have ones that are fixed on posts, or you can have the portable ones. So it's whatever your preference is.
When we reconstructed that road about 5 years ago, we had initially planned to do something like that, either flashed or indicated what the speed was. And Chief DeAngelis was adamantly opposed to them because he felt like, at least to some drivers, it was an incentive to see how fast they could get up on the score, if you will. I know Mr. DeRusso, I spoke to him, and he doesn't feel those are effective either, for whatever it's worth. But we did at one point, we were planning to do those, and that's why we didn't end up doing them. And we have the sign, which we can move around and at least get data. I don't know if that sign we have can reflect the speed of the cars going by or not, but we do have a mobile sign that we got a couple of years ago.
Well, I think instead of doing radar, just when he finally does some stuff with his rail trail crossings, and we have our own rail trail issues, maybe we could have just a caution blinking amber light or something that's, caution ahead, rail trail crossing, or whatever we come up with, so that would maybe help in that situation too. But yeah, I agree with Tom actually on the radar signs, because some people like to see exactly how fast they can go.
We'll throw a camera on it. Yeah. I think we probably had our biggest turnout in a long time, and I think we need to show them something that that we're prepared or preparing or looking into something that might help them address it. The cone aspect, I think it was great that you're able to allow that. I can't visualize how that will happen. All I can think of is the damn cones at the Winchester Street in Keene, because they're moving them now, depending on the time of day. So that's in the back of my mind. But you know, there was a legitimate concern with the horses and the children, the adults crossing the road and all that. I think we just have to be responsive in some way, and the trail is part of it. I just don't. This whole thing tonight was just, I think Krebs said it best, was basically paralysis by analysis. And it's somebody who's it seems to me, has an engineering background, thinks like an engineer, doesn't have the bandwidth to consider that there might be another way and still stay within the rules. And it's not a flaw, it's just, it just doesn't make sense to me that we have 30 here, 30 here, 35
right,
here.
35-mile-an-hour sandwich, yeah.
Well, I think his answer was we should make ours 35.
Or take the road over.
Yeah, well, that's enough.
Yeah, so, I don't know, I get it. I'm not trying to say I don't understand, but I think anybody who's taking the easy way out does this. The person that tries to solve a problem looks for solutions, and clearly they're not in a position to do that or want to, and they've got a huge state to cover. It's one individual, so I understand it. But I think anything we can do that people could look at and say, well, look at this is what they're doing, and the trail part is, you know, would be a very important part of it, with the caution signs, the flashing light. But I never thought about the speed one being, how fast can I go? I see those things and boy, it just, I'm dropping, because I don't want to get.
You think there's a camera?
Well, yeah, you never know, but or maybe they don't have them
I
in New
don't think
Hampshire.
that's legal in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Right, so I don't think cameras that monitor, certainly to monitor speed.
I've never
give a
seen it
ticket.
in the state of New Hampshire, so no, but they do utilize them in a lot of different states.
Certainly
And
a lot of
they're
other
a big money
countries,
maker
too.
for a lot of cities.
And I think we ought to get into them for their covered bridges, especially the ones that are getting hit quite often. That
Yeah, we ought to have
you and
something.
Joe could work together or something to, I don't know where the funding would come from, but if a bridge gets hit, maybe we could, you know, or have it, just somebody look at it and see if there's something that shouldn't be going through, whether it's weight or trailering something. Or,
How much does a pickup truck weigh?
less than 3 tons.
No, I know that, but I'm thinking about when I'm carrying a ton of pellets.
Well, it's probably 58 for the truck. Your Dodge?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's a
it's
big one.
it's a Ford.
Are you gonna Ford? Aluminum bed?
Do you have
Probably,
sandbags
you're right
in
around
there?
6,000 pounds, probably.
And what's the weight limit? 3 ton?
Yeah.
Oh, good, I just make it. Okay.
Just
I
don't
just-
have your wife in the car when you're driving over it too, then you're pushing it.
But it's the things in tow, you know, for lack of a better word, a plumber's truck that has
Oh, God,
the
they're
big
loaded.
box on the back, and
Yeah.
so,
Is there anything that we can help you with in the department? Do you feel like things are moving well and
Yes. I mean,
everybody's
there's-
pretty acclimated?
Yes, I mean, there's still a lot of things I want to achieve. I'm still working on policies. I'm getting close to midway through what we're doing, just redoing the policies completely.
it's a big undertaking.
It is. And it brings back some nightmares from my previous occupation as accreditation manager. But one of my desires is to get state accreditation. The state is now in the process of implementing the program for state accreditation for police departments. I think that's a great endeavor. And I'd like to see our department be one of the first ones to get state accreditation. So I think it'd be something that we could probably achieve. And it'd be quite an achievement. Yeah.
What's involved?
They're going to identify the program. They've got a conference in Lincoln, New Hampshire next month. It's a 3-day conference, but I don't think it really takes 3 days to go over the program. I think they're gonna publicize something. I think the New Hampshire Police Academy is gonna publicize the program on their website. But it'll be a complete list of standards. I would guess, comparing it to maybe some other state programs, it's maybe like 100, 150 standards that you have to comply with. It has to be in your policies. So the policies that I'm refurbishing right now kind of follow Keene's policies, and they're fully accredited. So that's a much higher standard, CLEAR accreditation than state accreditation. So I'm hoping that a lot of the policies I'm already refurbishing will fall into the state standards that they're going to publish eventually. So we'll see.
Is there training for the officers or anything they need to do as part of it?
There should be a department training that goes over the process and the program, so they have a full understanding of what's entailed for that program. But it'll be interesting to see what the program totally encompasses. So I'm hopeful. We'll see. It'll be a high hurdle to leap, but I think we can do it.
Great. What's the benefit?
Well, when I initially talked to Primex, they weren't willing to reduce our premiums. But now that the state has the program going, they're looking to possibly give us a little reduction in premiums. Plus, it ensures people of Swanzey that the police officers of Swanzey are doing procedures that are nationally and statewide accepted, and that we're a professional organization doing standards that are meant to be done by law enforcement officers. So I'm hoping that we can achieve it. We'll see.
Great. So
We could also provide some liability, additional coverage if there were an incident that, we got a complaint, let's say, or something, that we have clear policies that are up to snuff and procedures. There's a benefit there as well.
Hopefully make the prosecutions easier as far as professional witnessing and things. So.
Yeah, so I'm refurbishing the policies right now as we speak. I'm making sure that we meet nationally standard accepted procedures, but when the state comes and does an evaluation, they'll assure that we are doing that, and that those practices are being done, and that's sort of a seal of approval. So it's kind of important, at least I think it is.
I think you're right.
So you'll find out more details. Are you going to the conference in Lincoln?
I might. It's probably a 2-hour drive up and a 2-hour drive back. I think the important aspect of that conference is about 4 hours, so I should be able to do it, I think. If not, I'll see what's on the New Hampshire Police Academy's website. Maybe that has quite a bit of detail on that, and if it has, then I might not have to go up there. But if it doesn't, I can run up there for a day.
When is it again?
It's next month, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
It's just a couple of days away.
Well,
It's not next
Meeting
week.
May.
Well, I think more mid to late April, I believe.
Just get a hotel room and stay over.
3 days.
Let your hair down.
I can't leave the town for that long.
Well, it's a sincere consideration.
Very good.
We hope you'll take, unlike the office chair that we had to force on you.
We will make another directive if we must.
I'm looking at the improvements for the building too, at least the interior, so hopefully we can delve into that.
Yes, Mr. Jasmine mentioned that you spoke to him, so that's
Good.
progress on that area as well.
Sure. I'm gonna look professional too, not just be professional.
You look anything but.
He looks anything but
Oh,
professional.
no, the opposite. Nothing but.
April 22nd is Green Up Keene Day, as far as I know, but I think it's a Saturday. I don't know if.
Do we want to protest that?
No, is Swanzey doing anything? Because it's
Sweep up
kind of
Swanzey.
the county is, kind of invited to participate with Keene, I guess, so.
Sweep up Swanzey, I believe.
Yeah. But
Ashley
it's the
Ford
blue
leads
bags and
something.
the walking on the side of the road and all that, just so you know. So.
Very good.
Get out your reflective vest. We expect to see you on Route 10.
There is my coat.
We'll give you a blue bag.
Very good.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, gentlemen, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Thank you,
You
sir.
too.
Good luck on the car. You have a toughie on capital improvement now.
Can you believe it?
He took my
I
spot.
was shocked too. All right, you want to do your public input?
Yeah, do we
now?
have any public input?
Looks like none at this time.
April meeting schedule.
None been received. So I've left this item blank. I think we're gonna need to meet 3 times in April. I've got a couple time-sensitive ones for next week, and then I need to meet on the 26th, so you can pick your poison between the 12th and the 19th, or if you want to try to go 3 weeks in between, you could try to do that too. I don't have anything
So
planned for the.
5th and the 26th are must.
Yes.
12th would give Bill a head start on getting his taxes done.
The extension.
He wants to start on the 19th.
And file this, yeah.
So, well, why would?
So we're gonna try to go back to every other, but this week it doesn't quite
This
align.
month?
Yeah, this was gonna be another, right?
We could try 5th and 26th and see if something comes up in the middle, or if you want to plan on one of those, the 12th or the 19th.
Well, you said the 26th is a
Yeah,
definite?
5th and the 26th, yes. 26th, we have public hearing on community power, because the
Okay.
notices are going out. And next week, I know Chief Joe would like to get the detail rates and the cruiser ironed out. I think we have a couple other items as
So
well.
just in case Ken doesn't come back next week, the 12th might give him an extra week to,
So meet on the 12th,
oh no, meet on the 19th
meet on the
maybe.
19th.
What do you think, Bill? Does
That's
that
fine.
work for you?
Yep, that's good.
So 12th is, right now is no BOS. And administrative update.
So we have a email from our illustrious assessor, Mr. Marizoff. He's been working to resolve a few prior year
Yep.
Eversource matters. If you look at the bottom line of just over 40,000, sounds bad, and I guess it's not great, but we do budget 50,000 a year for abatements, which normally we don't spend anywhere near. So it looks like this is going to be one of the years we have to spend at least a chunk of it. But so this is for tax years 2020 and 2021.
What are our options?
Well, they were trying to get 110,000, so that sounds a lot better than that. We could go to try to hear the case at the VTLA, would be the next step. We'll probably spend 15 to 20 in our preparations and attendance.
And I'll ask for Ken, he can justify this.
Yes.
So what's their basis for the 110?
So there were legislative changes, I think it was HB 700 in, I think, 2019. So basically, the idea was to try to limit these disputes going forward. So there was supposed to be a leveling off or a tapering down period to level off into the new lower assessments. And I think we just stayed a little too high on, for these 2 years, didn't taper off enough. So they were, basically, as I understood it from Dave, was that they came to the higher number using a lower starting point, because that created a bigger difference between where we were and where they thought we should be. So he doesn't think the 110 is correct, but he feels that settling this is the best, that this amount is the best course.
Need a motion or?
Just before that, just a quick question. Why the difference in percentage between the 2 years?
That's a good question. Oh, I think that, I think the interest rates
Right.
changed.
the interest
Interest
rates went
rates
down.
changed, yeah.
Now they're gonna go back up probably, it's a state. law,
When
but-
when the interest on taxes, the interest on abatements changed as well, I believe, but I will verify that, but I believe
I
that.
just thought it was further back than 2020.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Maybe time
Seems
doesn't
like
go as
it.
quick as I thought.
Usually it's longer ago than you think, so
Yeah.
I can check on the interest rates. And make
But
sure
yeah, I'd be
those are right.
supportive of that.
Consensus or motion?
Consensus is fine.
Works for me.
Yeah, so that or less. If he determines the percentage could be different.
Yep. Precisely.
How's Julius?
Hey, doing good. Very productive EMS committee meeting, so
And you-
happy about that.
And you beat us, you got done before
I
us.
know, I thought you were gonna be. Oh, good.
Well, my 550 for the second appointment was closer to 650, so by the time we got there.
Anybody online, Josh, for public input?
Not at this time?
I just have one other quick item. We've had a request to have Ashley's office, instead of being on the first floor, be in there. Because the antiques that are in the first floor office are germane to the village and the period of the building, and she wants to remove them, obviously to have office space. So the request was to have her come up here. So
I would prefer to explore kind of finishing the project we started in Town Hall. When we talked about the additional office space, we had talked about a possible mezzanine area. I think that would work better. I think they try to reserve that, to have a dedicated space upstairs for if they have, say, a wedding up here, an area for the caterers to be aside. So I think, especially if one of the staircases go through there, I think that would be a difficult space to kind of secure, which I think is what she's hoping to do. She's hoping to have a filing cabinet with some of her records, and so I would prefer to explore the town hall option, have Mike come back and brainstorm with you, and then work up a proposal versus that space. Although I do think there was a benefit to having her here, where there is a lot of programming that they're ongoing. Just good to have someone here as much as possible. Keep an eye on the space, but that would be my preference versus up
I can
here.
get back to him on that. And then, did you get a chance to talk to Cordell about the outcome of the bond vote and the?
I did not,
Wilcox
I'm
and
sorry, I
Cutler?
didn't know that was that time sensitive, I didn't
Don't
know.
know, I think I know we're all, meaning me, curious
Yeah.
to know what, just so we can plan, whether there's a reversionary clause, or we have to buy it, or it goes on the open market.
We have to buy it on the open market and make it a better deal. Who else is gonna wanna buy it?
Well, if there's a reversionary clause, huh?
He knows who will buy it. And we don't want that.
We don't want that here.
No, I think the Wilcox thing was pretty clear that, right, if it's not used for educational instruction, they have to revert it back to the town.
I just don't know if that was specific to that property or not. I know in the school district's marketing, they were talking about selling it, so I think that's why you wanted to check on it.
And we can trace its lineage back to 100 years ago, right? I think.
Did you go to school then?
Not quite. 96, but not 100.
You're a year or two after Ken.
Yeah, maybe 6 months.
Any non-publics?
No, just a couple informational ones that I can just hand
Any
out.
Julius?
Do you have any items for us? this
Julius
evening?
is just gloating that he got out of his meeting.
He should be halfway to home by now.
That's right.
I won't tell Izzy what he's been doing up
You're
here.
excited whenever you get to the EMS report. It's gonna be like,
That's their favorite kind of report.
A one-pager?
I wish. When we're done, that's full.
The executive summary better be a page if you want anyone to read it.
I was gonna say, I think we're sitting at roughly 10.
That's not bad.
Well, you have some to go to come up with a sewer commissioner's final report.
Yeah, I see you still have, that's taking up all the space in your
Oh,
notebook
yeah.
there. What have you thought about that so far?
I sit by it every time I sit in my car seat. It's right there. It's wedged between the seat and the console. I have a feeling that's a weekend project.
Care to adjourn?
Bill, you making that motion?
So move.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
This meeting was recorded by Falls Area Community Television, located at 1 Hospital Court, Bellows Falls, Vermont. If you would like a copy of the meeting, our phone number is 802-463-1613, or email us at fact810@gmail.com. Falls Area Community TV, keeping government honest.